simplest of things can make you happy. Morning and welcome to this very damp morning here in Yorkshire. It's October. I've come out this morning in search of some nice autumnal images. I haven't got anything in mind. I'm going to have a bit of a change from wildlife photography. If you watch my channel, you'll know it's predominantly wildlife photography, but today it's nice to do something a little bit different. So I've come to this little nature reserve which is really close to home, and I haven't got any preconceived ideas really, no specific images in mind. I've got 3 lenses, so I've got Canon 100mm macro, standard 50mm lens and a 24mm wide angle. Just those 3 lenses and the tripod, so it's relatively light today. I'm hoping I find some nice close-up images, but just anything where I can make the most of that colour that's now starting to come through. So at the moment it's actually really overcast, but it's always worth getting out earlier, because even though the light isn't quite decent enough yet, I don't think, being here earlier means I can find some images, I can have a good scout round, I can find some pictures, and then when the light does improve I know exactly where to be and exactly what I want to shoot. So always worth being there half an hour, maybe even an hour earlier. So I've just come down to this corner, which is kind of like a little pond. It's not usually a pond, but it's been so wet that it kind of is now. And there's quite a lot of potential down here. So lots of colour and some gorgeous berries. Some really nice rose hips. Some beautiful colour on the leaves coming through, so I might be having a look at that. And then also we've got some aquatic plants down here at the edge. Bit of birch colour here, always nice. Lots of teasels here in this area. So it's always good to have a walk around as much as you can. Just cast your eye over absolutely everything and see what you can find. Right, I've decided that there is definitely enough potential here for me to do some shots. So now it's a case of looking a bit closer. So I'm going to look in more detail, and this is where you need to slow down and take your time. I know there's potential there. I know there's some good images in there. You just got to slow down, and that's when you start to see things. If you rush around, I'm rushing around a bit now, but once you slow down you'll start to see so much more, and that's where you're going to get the best images, particularly for macro. So I guess it's kind of like seed heads on top of this plant, and what I've tried to do, I've had a look initially, so anything like this I'll always have a look handheld, take a few test shots and decide where I want to be. Then I'll get the tripod as near to that position as I can and get the camera set up. And the thing with this is I'm trying to find an area that's as parallel to the camera as possible to get more depth of field. So I've gone for this area here. This area just seems a bit flatter in nature, which means everything's going to be a bit sharper throughout. And then I've got the tripod into position so I can look directly down onto it. This has actually got quite a lot of white to it on these seed heads, so that's one thing I do. If I found a few options to photograph and there's something with white in there, then I'll try to photograph that first, because I know as it gets brighter I'm more likely to get difficulties with the exposure and blowing out the highlights. So anything white, I try and photograph that first of all and then move on to the other things. Yeah, I'm well happy with that. It's really simple, but what I was drawn to was just a sort of combination of the colours, white and brown, which is a nice contrast. But again, just the patterns, and it's hard to describe sometimes, but it's like little sort of droplets almost. So in terms of the exposure, I'm using a tripod and everything is really still. It's very low winds, which is the main reason I'm out this morning. So I'm not worried about any subject movement. So I'm going to use a low ISO to keep the quality up, and I'm going to be using a slow shutter speed for this shot. Really solid tripod, good ball head. I've also got mirror lockup as well, which should help to reduce the vibration a bit. The main thing to choose for this shot was the aperture. So I've gone with f5.6. I want to go with a fairly wide aperture, because I think if I use too small an aperture, then it's just going to bring too much of the background into focus, and I'm not going to get that effect that I'm really after on this macro shot. Right, next one. I've just decided to go for a close-up of the rose hips, keeping it really simple. All these rose hips and the leaves are absolutely covered in water droplets. So I've just picked out a small group of the rose hips, and again tried to get the camera as parallel as I can. Really important to maximise that depth of field. But now we've got a little bit of a breeze coming in, which is often the case an hour after sunrise. So I've put my ISO up just to give myself a faster shutter speed. I'm just a little concerned about getting subject movement and blurring the shot. So I've now gone to ISO 400, and it's giving me a shutter speed of 1/50th. So that's still a fairly slow shutter speed. I'm using manual focus as I do for most of my macro and landscape photography. The thing with this is the point of focus is really important. So with these rose hips, the rose hips around the outside are slightly closer to the camera, and the one in the centre is a bit further away. So you have to decide where you want to focus. So I've actually tried it with 2 focus points. So the first one I've focused on the centre. I think I prefer that effect, and then I've tweaked the focus just a bit nearer to focus on this left-hand side rose hip on the tip of it. And interestingly as well, because of the position of the camera, focusing on that rose hip is actually the same depth of field as the one on the right-hand side that's also nearer. So those two are actually in pretty sharp focus together. So I've taken 2 different shots, 2 different focus points, and see which one I prefer after. If you're using a timer like I do, 2-second timer, and it's a good idea when you press the shutter, just watch the subject just to make sure it doesn't move. So I'm firing the shutter, and then I'm just looking really carefully to make sure there's no slight movement. And if there is, then I'll take it again until I think it's as still as it can be. I always think you should go with your instincts when you're doing this type of photography, and there's plenty of stuff around here, so I kind of think I should be looking at other stuff that's more colourful, maybe got more patterns to it. But I've actually been drawn simply to these leaves, and the leaves of this rose bush. The light is so perfect. The sun's over here, so I'm shooting slightly towards the light, but because it's so soft, it just gives a wonderful quality of lighting. Soft backlighting is absolutely fantastic for macro photography, particularly with leaves, because it just shines through from the back and it shows up the veins. And the other reason that I'm drawn to this is because this birch tree in the background, which is really turning yellow now, is just acting as a perfect backdrop. And from this position where I'm shooting, it's almost completely yellow backdrop. So I've got a mixture of the backlit leaves with really nice colour to them themselves, and then also the yellow background as well. So very autumnal looking image. Too close. No, it's just slight adjustments all the time. You always want to try and get the right distance, so I was too close. I've come back a little bit. That looks about spot on. Oh, the breeze has got up even more, so with that in mind, I don't want it to be blurred. I want it to be absolutely pin sharp. So I'm at ISO 400, and I'm working with a shutter speed about 250th of a second. To say, you can't really tell from this, but the breeze has got up. The breeze is coming and going, so I've got 250th of a second and still a wide aperture as well. The light at the moment is just absolutely perfect. It was a little dark before, and it's just slightly brightened up. Gorgeous, gorgeous soft light. It's just kind of got this really nice, warm, soft glow to it. Stunning, absolutely stunning, fantastic. Leaves, backlit leaves with some water droplets near to leads. I get so much out of this type of photography, I just absolutely love it. And it's a bit of a break for me as well from wildlife, but it can be really, really relaxing, this type of photography, and nobody around, not being bothered by anyone. You know, sometimes the simplest of things can make you happy. Beautiful. So I hope you found this vlog useful as to how I approach this style of photography, and that you learned a few tips for yourself as well. So the main thing really is just to take your time. Don't go rushing around trying to get lots of pictures. You're much better trying to concentrate on a few images, as I did today. Try and be creative and just get what you really want, and you'll come away much happier, I think. I'm going to put a couple of videos on the screen, so if you click this video here, you'll see me a similar video where I'm doing very similar type of photography, and the other video as well, you might find some useful tips there for nature photography. Do click subscribe if you're not subscribed for more of these videos, and also photography tutorials. Thanks for watching. I'll see you somewhere in nature sometime soon.